thank you for coming to my talk and not going to the AI talk. I promise that there will be AI content, a little bit. And forgive me, I'm looking at my phone because I realized the other day, like 2 days ago, that I'm doing a live demo as part of this, and I needed to mirror my screen and my speaker notes are on my computer, so now they're on my phone. So thanks for having me. This is my first bad camp. My name is Reynolds, and this talk is titled, Where Are You Actually Managing Your Content? Because we have these things called content management systems, but do we actually manage our content in these systems? Who am I? My name is Reynolds, as I said. I'm actually a WordPresser, but I'm originally from the Bay Area, so I guess that gives me half of a point. I've been around the WordPress ecosystem for about 20 years. I joined Pantheon as a software engineer in 2021. I moved over to developer relations last year. I went to my first DrupalCon in Atlanta. And you might know me as that guy, that WordPress guy who has been on Talking Drupal a couple times. And I will continue to be on Talking Drupal as long as John and Nick keep inviting me. But for the purpose of this talk, as a developer relations or developer advocate, I wear a lot of hats. For the purpose of this talk, I'm going to be taking off my WordPress hat and putting on my Drupal hat. So now I'm a Drupaler, right? Okay, great. What are we talking about? It might be surprising, but at Pantheon, we don't actually write content inside the Drupal admin. Shocking, right? Usually when I'm writing a blog post for the Pantheon.io blog, I start off in a Google document, I compose my blog post there, I put pictures and stuff in, maybe I will get my boss Steve Persh to take a look at it and do an editorial, to do a review of it. We have a content person, she might do an editorial review. I might send it off to some subject matter experts internally to get a sort of technical review, and then when all of that is done, I will copy and paste from the Google Doc into the Drupal admin. And then after I do that, I need to remove some line breaks. I need to swap out the images that only live on Google and only visible for me. And if I actually accidentally hit publish, then it's going to be broken for everyone else on the internet. And upload those into the Drupal media library. I probably need to add a featured image of some kind. And then when all of that is done, then I can finally hit publish, and then it's live on the web. There must be a better way, right? All that middle work is just like useless human labor, and it takes time, sometimes a lot of time, if you have a lot of images or you have a lot of documents, if you have like a documentation site perhaps, it can take a lot of time to do all that sort of copy and pasting stuff. And that's sort of where Content Publisher, this thing that we announced officially in public preview last week, that's sort of where this lives. I like to think of it like this diagram where you've got a bunch of input sources on one side, and then you've got this magical Pantheon thing in the middle, and on the other side is your website. Today we're talking about Google Docs, but tomorrow it could be Office 365, it could be Notion, it could be Obsidian, it could be whatever, wherever you're putting content. And Pantheon operates that middle layer. There's some translation layer stuff, there's a GraphQL API, it normalizes the input and provides it to endpoints that can be consumed across the API. And that is what our Drupal module and our WordPress plugin are doing. So we'll be looking at some architectural diagrams and to show you how all this stuff works.
Hey, Chris, why don't you do a live demo for these folks?
Oh, yeah, I guess I could do a live demo. Thank you, AI Chris. So let's do a live demo. So I have a site, a Drupal site. Let's look at the site. And wait for Wi-Fi. Or it could be my site that's slow. So this website is basically just, I'm taking stories by H.P. Lovecraft and putting them on my website, taking them from the Gutenberg, Gutenberg.org, no relation to the WordPress editor, and yeah, just republishing them on my website. in this pretty thing that I did, and this is live on the internet at lovecraft.jazzsequence.com if you care to look. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a new document. And then the first thing that I need to do when it loads, live demos, waiting on...
I can say that the Wi-Fi is weak in here.
Yeah.
That's impacting.
Yeah. Wonder if it would be faster if I tethered off my phone. Maybe, possibly. There we go. I saw something pop up. All right, so I've got this little Pantheon thing here. This is like a widget. This is like an app that gets added to your Google Workspace. The first thing that I'm going to do, I've got my empty blank document. I'm going to pick a story at random. This one looks good. I'm going to go to read now. It's going to give me an HTML version of this book or story. Close that one. And then I'm just going to copy it into this Google Doc. I'm going to give the Google Doc a title. That is probably fine. And then I'm going to click my Pantheon button over here. And the first thing I need to do is to allow Content Publisher to read this doc. And then, yes, click Allow. And give it a minute. And that will connect it to my site. Oh, I'll connect to Content Publisher. I now need to connect it to my site or a collection on a site. Collection is basically just a way of putting documents together. In this case, we're going to use this one. I only have one collection for the Lovecrafty site. So we're going to use that one. Click on Connect. And then give it a minute. And now I can click on Preview. And that opens up in a new window. And what's cool about this is now I've got this content on my site. Except it's not actually on my site. This doesn't actually live inside Drupal yet. This is in some weird Cthulhu interim meta space that doesn't really exist. And because it hasn't been published, it's just a preview. It's just pulling the stuff off from that API layer. What's cool about this is I can go and show the editor, and now I've got a side-by-side view of my document, and I can change stuff. Like, I don't need it to say Project Gutenberg. I can get rid of this content right here. I'm going to keep this sort of metadata here for now because maybe I'll want it in the future. Maybe I'll get rid of it. But we can move all that stuff down. I can get rid of this note here. In fact, I could probably get rid of this title entirely because there's a title right there. So there we go. And then that looks really bad, so let's fix that. Looks like there's some sort of weird margin thing that happens sometimes. I can change the margins, and now it doesn't look broken. That's actually kind of a neat thing, that you can do margin stuff inside Google Docs and it shows up. That's cool. I think it's cool. There's another cool thing that I like a lot is I mentioned the picture situation where, like, if you copy pictures from Google Docs into Drupal or WordPress or wherever, it's not the actual image. It looks like the image and it makes you think that it is, but it's not. What's really cool about this is I can open it up in a new window, and probably you can't see this, but it says cdn.content.pantheon.io. That means it's living in a CDN that's at the edge, that's always cached and whatever. It's not living inside of Google, so it's public, but it's also not living inside of Drupal because it's at the API. So that's kind of neat. On this site, this is all the Gutenberg license stuff, and I actually have a link to the Gutenberg project license here in my my site, so I can get rid of all of this license information to clean that up as well. We're going to go to end of Project Gutenberg book, and then we have the story, and I'm pretty happy with that. That looks good. I can also go up here, and I've got a preview URL, so I can click on that. That gives me a link, and I can share this link. This is an incognito window, so I'm not logged into anything. But I can share this with my colleagues, and I can have them review what it actually looks like on the site before it has actually been pushed to the site at all. So that's pretty neat. I decide that I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to hit the big publish button, and then I'm going to need to do some meta stuff. Again, we've got a preview here. I can choose what section I put it in, and sections are just kind of ways of organizing your content in Content Publisher. It's not a Google Docs thing, it's a specifically Content Publisher thing. It's a way to just like group stuff, and you can have many different sections just organizationally putting it. So I have this no section, I don't want to put it there, I want to put it with my other stories. So I'm going to save that. And then I want to change the name to be the correct name. And probably change the slug. And you can see we've got these little sparkle icons over here. That means I can ask AI to generate something for me. So in this case, I'm going to use AI to generate a meta description. I picked that first one. That seems good. I can add a featured image here. I can add some tags. And I can use AI to generate those tags too, based on the content. It uses Gemini, because Pantheon does GCP and Google stuff. So we can do weird tales, grave robbing, gothic fiction. Okay, that's pretty good. And I warns me that I have unsaved metadata changes because I didn't actually save those things. So let's save that. And then I can, that slug is already used because I already did this story actually. So I'm just going to put a 1 because that's what you do when you duplicate things. All right, and then I hit publish, and it's going to bring it over into Drupal. I can click on the view live content, and I will see it live on my actual site. And now what's cool over here, as I'm looking at it on the Drupal site, so Pantheon, the content publisher documents aren't used like they're special, they're remote entities. I'll start off with that, which means that they don't actually live inside Drupal. There's this Pantheon documents section over here. These are the IDs that are actually coming from Google. That's how they're referenced. I think that's like if you look at the URL and it's got the weird long string, I think that's in there somewhere. Each of these is a remote entity. I am told that that's like, if you think of like YouTube videos or things like that where they're linking elsewhere, it's sort of the same idea. So it doesn't actually live in your Drupal site. But it does interact if you use Search API and Search API Pantheon to get that configured. You can search. You can add it to Solr so that it is indexing all of your stuff. And you can see there are 7 items indexed. I think that I probably, since I added one, probably that number should be more. But no, there's still 7. Okay. It hooks into that. I can add it to my menus. I can do whatever. The other thing that I want to show is when I go into permissions, and I'm going to go to Pantheon Content Publisher. It's got a setting so that anonymous users can see it. So if you go to this site right now, that's the wrong one. That's my WordPress one. But if you went to the site right now, you would be able to see all of these things just as I can. That's pretty cool. Let me look at my notes to see if I got everything. I think I got everything. Cool. So that is kind of the thing. I'm going to hop back over to my slides, but feel free to stop me and ask me questions.
You got one on that. So these documents live in Google Docs and then are connected by the Pantheon. You said they're not in the Drupal database.
Correct, yeah.
So if I'm working on a local copy of the site, editing things, it would be pulling that same list.
It'd be hitting the
of all
same
the
API,
topics
yeah.
on my site?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That is because I didn't do that part. Okay. So Pantheon's a web host, right? Oh wait, we don't use the H word. Pantheon is a web ops platform, right? What does this have to do with that stuff? It might seem like Content Publisher isn't super Pantheon-y, but we see this as being sort of fundamental to this intersection of design and content and development, and that is sort of why we're working on this. Because really this thing that we call website operations is all about how to get all the pieces of a website working well together, and that's really the goal of Content Publisher. Because today you've got something that looks like this, and I will break this down and go into each level specifically. But what we're looking at is different roles using similar but different tools and processes to do the jobs that they do for building a website. Obviously we have, to start, we have development teams. They have a process that looks like this. This makes a lot of sense. Probably you're familiar with this. You push your code out. Maybe you have one team working on one set of features, another team working on another set of features. One team merges their code in, the other team tries to merge their code in. There's a merge conflict. We can resolve that. We can do a diff, whatever. That process works pretty well. With design, it kind of works somewhat similarly. It maybe starts off in Figma or something else, but ultimately it gets put into code. And then once it's there, if there's a design change along the way, maybe there's a merge conflict or some other conflict, you go to the design team. That kind of works, but it can be a little bit more annoying. Content is where there's actual problems. Because, again, if you have the story that I told at the beginning, if you do all your content, you're composing in Google Docs, once it's in the CMS, now it lives in the CMS. Now I might be having one team making editorial changes in the CMS, but I still have the Google document over here, and a different set of people might have access to that Google document and be making changes over there. And if these two groups work together or aren't working together, and then we need to merge this stuff onto the site somehow, well, it's not as easy to do a diff merge for a Google Doc versus some changes in your Drupal admin. There's no app for that. Similarly, if you're doing like a landing page or single page app sort of thing, you might start with the content and get it launched, and that's awesome. The page is live, but then the content starts getting updated, and meanwhile we might be making changes over in the CMS, and again, those things come to a head when they don't match, and we have to figure out how to resolve the discrepancies. And part of the reason why this happens is because everyone is sort of working in their own little silos and using different tools for the stuff that they do. It's not always integrate the workflows between different departments or different roles. So the future of Content Publisher is really more than just Google Docs. It's really ideally more than content at all. What we're really going for is collaboration across teams, where you might have content that can be staged against the latest code that can be staged against the latest content. Assembling content and code and design can happen at the same time and released at the same time, and you can roll those things back at the same time. And maybe we'll never get there, but that is sort of the ideal world that we're trying to build. And instead of everyone using a similar process with different tools, creating more work for each other, the goal is that everybody uses the same workflow and all of those pieces are integrated together and merged together. So this is really just a more complicated version of the diagram that I showed at the top, but I like this one because it has this it gives this impression of a many-to-many relationship. Again, we've got the Google Docs as sort of the thing that we're talking about today, but this is really more than just Google Docs, because the API layer is really the important part. And with that API layer, you can have any number of different things. You could have a Drupal site feeding into the Content Publisher API and outputting to Next.js, or have Drupal site that's feeding into the API and outputting to a WordPress site. You could do Google Docs to Next.js and not have a CMS involved at all. One of the things that we are actually doing for our documentation site, if you're familiar with Pantheon and our documentation, we are very passionate about making sure that our documentation is editable by people, that you can submit a pull request, you can make changes or suggestions on docs that we have online. That's really important. But we also get sometimes queries for content changes or like release notes or things from product managers internally who really only work inside Google Docs. And so as the Docs team in DevRel, we need to transcribe those Google Docs into Markdown so that it can go on the site. The next generation version of the doc site that we're currently building right now is built in Next.js. So our old site is using Gatsby in our front-end sites implementation. That takes a really long time to build because Gatsby takes a long time to build thousands of pages. So we're using Next.js, which actually I think builds a lot faster. And then on the back end, we're still using a GitHub repository with Markdown files, but also we're integrating with a Google Docs collection using Content Publisher and feeding both of those into the Content Publisher API, and the Next.js app is consuming those API endpoints. So there's no CMS involved at all, but we're still sort of dogfooding our own product. The other cool thing about Content Publisher that I will say right here is you don't actually need to be on Pantheon to use it. You can use this wherever you are. It doesn't require Pantheon hosting. It's just a sort of standalone product, which is pretty cool. I have it actually running on my personal site that's still running on DigitalOcean, and it is doing the thing that it does. Did I say everything? I think I said everything. Yeah, that's all the things. That's kind of the thing. I'm open for questions. Again, it launched into public preview last week at Content Marketing World. There is a free tier. At the free tier level, you get like 50 documents that you can publish a month, which seems pretty good. I don't know that I'm personally going to publish more than 50 things a month. There's probably like some large like media type organizations that would do more than that, but that's still a pretty good number. There's obviously like tiers that scale up. There's an enterprise level. There's a 30-day trial, so that when you first sign up for it, you get all of the enterprise stuff, and then it scales down to the free tier. I don't think you need to enter a credit card or anything. I wrote a blog post about it, talks a lot about the stuff that I said here, also kind of comes at it from a little bit more of a WordPress perspective, but still tells the same story about how we do this in Drupal. And then the last link is the link to these slides specifically. Yeah, that's Content Publisher. I can actually show our doc site if anybody's like curious, because I have that the dev site on my laptop up as well. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions about this thing that we just launched.
Looks pretty cool.
I like to think so. Yeah, I mean, like, the story that I've told outside of this stuff, that I've told in sort of contextualizing Content Publisher from my own experience. So I did a lot of agency work, WordPress agency work, and I remember the team that I was on, the company, the agency that I worked for, we did a lot of Gutenberg stuff. And I remember specifically working with a client, a sort of large sort of entertainment conglomerate company, who their content team was, again, very embedded in the Google workspace sort of ecosystem. And we built all this really cool stuff for them to use in Gutenberg, like all these bespoke blocks, all this stuff that was specifically tailored to their experience and how they wanted to do their website. And when it finally came down to moving content into this new site that we built, it felt like pulling teeth to get them to use the WordPress admin. And the other part of that is, so the same agency, actually, coincidentally, that I was working at, HumanMade, worked with WP Campus a few months ago to do a sort of research study on how WordPress is used in higher education. And one of the main sort of things that agencies said, and respondents said that they were doing in that space was providing training to people to just use the admin. So in many ways, I see Content Publisher as being a way to like not do that thing. Like, don't worry about don't worry about creating a Drupal account for them to log into. Don't worry about teaching them how to use the admin. You can let them use the tools that they're used to using, and that can just be pulled into the site. And that's a really powerful and compelling use case. There's a very specific need that I know that I have directly had interactions with that it solves. So I feel like it's pretty cool. Like I think that there's something there. But yeah, that's sort of the story that I use to like how it makes sense in my head. Like it's not going to be the thing for everything either. Like obviously there's going to be times when you want to like do layout builder or something, or Gutenberg or whatever page builder you're using to like lay out a page. But to have the option, and for things like, again, higher education, you want your faculty to like control their own and edit their own bios. Like you don't want to send professors, like try to teach a professor how to use the Drupal admin just to edit their bio. You can just let them do that in Google Docs.
I noticed the metadata section. I wonder if that is configurable, or if the list of fields.
Yes. There are ways of essentially customizing the metadata that can be stored. And obviously, this is sort of like a sort of high-level demo. And also, I haven't specifically gone that deep into it. But yes, there are ways of like changing that metadata so that metadata that comes up, and then also on the other end of that, like where that metadata goes and how it's used can be handled differently as well. Yeah. There's also things. So a couple other things I didn't actually show, which maybe I can pop in while we're sort of here. Is this where is actually content publisher? There we go. There are things. Cool. An error occurred. There's a concept called a web styles, which is essentially like CSS classes that you can apply to your Google content. Your content in your Google document, you give it a web style, and then it gives it essentially a class on the front end. And similarly, there are smart components or smart chips, which can be inserted into the Google Doc. And the way that they're rendered, you build some stuff on the application layer, so that when it is rendered, it represents some sort of like dynamic content or some other sort of JavaScript thing or whatever. Yeah. I'm logged in as the wrong thing. That's why it's not showing stuff.
Can you keep your content editors from going wild and choosing whatever font they want and coloring their text?
I don't think fonts are carried over. I think that, I don't think fonts are carried over. I don't think colors are carried over. But like layout and like basic sort of like bold and italic and sort of like normal sort of styling stuff is carried over. Yeah. Try that again. I was not looking at my phone. Okay, there we go. Let's see. Yeah, so I don't think I have any. Oh, I do have some. So, it's just some CSS stuff, and you can add the name and just what the class is. I think I actually did it wrong. I think that's why that doesn't actually do stuff. But then that can, like, if you have CSS in your theme or whatever, then you can correlate with that. So like if you had like a pull quote or something that you wanted to apply, that was an example. That was actually live streamed. If you go to the Pantheon YouTube channel and go to the live tab, you'll see a live stream of kind of this, but also like both a WordPress and a Drupal demo. And the person that was demoing the Drupal side was showing like he was able to use a web style that he had made to add a pull quote. Which is, a thing that can be done. The smart chips don't show up there because they would show up in the actual document. You'd like it's like an @ symbol and whatever. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Cool. Well, thank you all for having me, not booing me off the stage.